Okay, so once again, good afternoon. I thought that we are now in the descriptive statistics, no? But by the way, so our topic is the rationale and sampling techniques as what our presenter, no? So we are currently in process of updating some techniques, especially at present, no, we are on the pandemic, no? It would normally be impractical to study a whole population, right? So for example, when doing a questionnaire survey, sampling is the method that allows researchers to infer information about a population based on results from a subset of the populations without having to investigate every individual. So reducing the number of individuals in a study reduces the cost and workload and may make it easier to obtain high quality information. But this has to be balanced against having a large enough sample sizes with enough power to detect a true associations. If a sample is to be used by whatever method it is chosen, it is important that the individual selected are representative of the whole or the entire population. And this may involve specifically targeting hard to reach groups. Let's say, for example, no, if the electoral rule for a town was used to identify participants, some people such as the homeless would not be registered and therefore excluded from the study by default. So there are several different sampling techniques available and they can be subdivided into two groups. What else? The probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In probability, or random sampling, you start with a complete sampling frame of an eligible individual from which you select your sample. In this way, all eligible individuals have a chance of being chosen for the sample and you will be more able to generalize the results from your study. Probability sampling methods tend to be more time-consuming and expensive than non-probability sampling. In non-probability sampling or non-random sampling, you do not start with a complete sampling frame. So some individuals have no chance of being selected. Consequently,
Yes.
you cannot estimate the effect of sampling error and there is a significant risk of ending up with a non-representative sample which produces non-generalizable results. However, non-probability sampling methods tend to be cheaper and more convenient and they are useful for exploratory research and hypothesis generation. Okay? For us to give more details about the rationale and sampling techniques, let us all welcome our presenter for this afternoon. Take it away.
Good afternoon, Doc Melo and classmates. Good afternoon. This afternoon, we're about to discuss or to report or to present topics or subtopics of the rationale and sampling techniques. All right. So here are the points of discussion. First is the rationale. Second one is the introduction to sampling. Third one is distinguish between a sample and a population. Steps of sampling, probability sampling, non-probability sampling, steps in computing the sample size. All right. So before I would like to start, I'd like to check my audio if it is loud and clear po. Okay lang po ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so here are the presenters. So first, I'll go as I'm about to discuss the rationale and the concept or the sample techniques. Second is to be followed by Sir Emmanuel Kahanding. Third one is Sir Paulo de Vieira. Fourth one is Sir Rafael de Ocampo Jr. And next is to be followed by Sir Eric Samson. And last but not the least, Ma'am Charlene Tan. All right. Okay, for our learning objectives for this afternoon, so define what is rationale and how to create a rationale, distinguish between a sample and a population, determine the steps of sampling process, and discuss the various sampling techniques from probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So we'll go through all throughout this discussion for this afternoon. as some of the reporter or presenter will deep discussed about the probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So for the rationale, now what is rationale in research? The rationale is when you ask to give the reasoning or justification for an action or a choice you make. So there's a focus on why in the rationale, why you choose to do something. So it should be anchored with justification or reasoning why you need to conduct such a study. Now, study or focus on something, a set of statements of purpose and significance, and often address a gap or a need. So rationale is a set of reasons or a logical basis for a course of action or a particular belief. So if we're going to talk about also the rationale of the statistics now, based on the discussion we had the last meeting, it's concerned with the collecting, analyzing, modeling, and interpreting data in order to investigate. Now, since we are now in the information world, all of the information is interpreted by means of the statistical data or by means of a mathematical digits. Now, just like for example, with the COVID-19, we're able to inform and up to date when it comes to the status of the Philippines, the number of the COVID patients who are admit positive, numbers of new recoveries, and so on and so forth. Okay. So when it comes also to the rationale of the sampling, it saves money. Okay, by allowing researchers to gather the same answer from a sample that they would receive from the population. Right. Next. Next is for the introduction to sampling. Okay, so sampling, it is a process of selecting a group of individuals from a population to study to them and characterize the population as a whole. So based here on the context that, based here on the books I've read, the concept of sampling, according to Kumar, 2011, sampling is a process of selecting a few. So the selecting a few is, these are samples, samples that are samples from a bigger group, which is the bigger group is the representation of the populations. So kumukuha tayo ng sample doon sa population wherein ma-meet natin yung tinatawag natin basis natin to estimate and predict the prevalence of a known piece of information doon sa ginagawa natin research study. Okay. So population, it includes all members from a specified group, all possible outcomes or measurements that are of interest. So the exact population will depend on the scope of the study. So talking about also the sample, it consists of some observations drawn from the population, so a part of a subset of the population. So the sample is the group of elements who participated in the study. If we're going to talk about also the sampling frame, so it's the information that locates and defines the dimensions of the universe. So going back to the concept of the sampling, selecting a sample other than the total populations has advantages and disadvantages. So what are these? So talking about on the advantage side, so it saves time, financial, and human resource. Kasi nga, hindi mo kailangan kunan ng information lahat ng population. You will just get the sample from the population, which is this sample will represent doon sa tinatawag mong pagkakandak ng study. So, concerning also to the disadvantage side, the researcher finds only an estimate or a prediction of information about the population's characteristics or other data, which are essential to the research study. So two factors may influence the degree of certainty about the interference drawn from a sample. So later on, I'll show you the diagram ano yung process ng pagkuha ng sample, and even on the next slides and also some of the presenter will dig deep, discuss about the various or the types of sampling. Okay, The first is finding basis upon large samples for more certainty than those based on smaller ones. So there's a rule na pag malaki yung larger the sample, the more accurate the findings. So the greater the variation in the study population with respect to the characteristics under study for a given sample size, the greater the uncertainty. So usually when it comes to the sampling, nagkakaroon din tayo ng tinatawag nating bias. So bias must be avoided in the selection of the sample in order to maximum precision in estimates within a given sample size. So example of bias in the selection of the sample. So when sampling is done by a non-random method such as selection is consciously or unconsciously influenced by human choice. So yung pipili ka lang, basta-basta ka lang kukuha ng isang individual or in doon participate as a sample mo. Okay? Next is when the sampling frame, no, from the list, index, or other population records, which serves as the basis of selection, does not cover the sampling population accurately and completely. So when a section of a sampling population is impossible to find or refuses to cooperate. So this is usually happen when we conduct our research, we give questionnaires, we do interviews, and we do answering the questionnaires. So sometimes mga participants or my respondents refuse to cooperate with your study. So the way in which we select a sample of individuals to be researched is participants is critical. So kaya nga may tinatawag tayong mga formulas, no, from the different sampling kung paano natin kukuha yung mga sample natin from the population. No, how we select participants, random sampling will determine the population to which we may generalize our research findings. Okay. So example, the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials is very difficult to conduct the trial on the entire population as it deals with time, money, and resources. So in research methodologies, sampling is method that helps researchers to infer information about a population based on the result from a subset of a population without having to investigate every individual. So, yan yung sinabi kanina ni Kumar, no, doon sa concept niya wherein kukuha lang ng piece of a sample doon sa population para i-conduct yung naturang study. No? The same thing also with the COVID-19 vaccines, no? Na wherein there's a few. There's from the population, kukuha lang ng sample para doon i-conduct yung rollout ng vaccination. So next example also, a telecom company planning to build a machine learning model to predict churn customers from their network. So one way is to collect all the customers' information and build a prediction model. So this method requires high computational power and resources. So the best way is to take a sample or subset of the customers from the population. So all customers, which represents the population, and build the machine learning model. This saves money and effort kasi nga medyo magiging magastos financially and it takes time when you conduct the study if the population will get involved in your study. All right, so as you can see on the slide, so it's a figure of which is a population and sample, wherein sample is there's an interference within the population. No, so hindi lang sa basta-basta kukuha ng sample na you just pick based on your preferences, but there's a formula, there's a process, there's a steps on how you're going to get sample from the populations. Wherein later on with some of the presenter will discuss further doon sa mga formulas and examples or ano yung process ng pagkuha ng different sampling sa population. Okay, so a good sample should satisfy the below conditions, no? Representativeness, accuracy, and size. So if you're going to talk about the representativeness, no, the sample should be the best representative on the population under the study. So kailangan yung sample na kinuha mo from the population will represent doon mismo sa gagawin mong study. So accuracy is defined as the degree to which bias is absent from the sample, no, para maiwasan natin yung bias, no. An accurate sample is one that exactly represent the population. So sa size naman, a good sample must be adequate in size and reliability. So gaya nga nang na-mention kanina, the larger the sample size, the more accurate the findings. Next is distinguish between a sample and a population. So before describing the sample procedures, we need to define a few key terms. No? Population, so means all members that meet a set of specifications of a specific criterion. No? Anumang klase, mapabata man, mapamatanda, masingle, married, so that they are part of the population. So element, no, a single member of any given population. So ito yung representation, a single element from the population. Whereas the sample is when only some elements are selected from a population. And if we're going to talk about also the census, when all elements are included. So lahat na ng elements, no, lahat na ng populations are involved doon sa tinatawag dito study, yung natawag doon ay census. Right? So here's an example, no, based from what I did a further research, no, when it comes to the example, no, our research team has decided to perform a study to analyze the grade point averages or GPAs for the 21 million college students in the US. So the researchers decided to obtain a random sample of 4,000 college students within the populations of 21 million. So the team wants to review the various majors and subsequent GPAs for the students or sample participants. Okay, so if kung mapapansin nyo, paano kayo nakuha yung 4,000 na yun? Okay, out from the 21 million college students. So out of the 4,000 participants, so nagkaroon sa lang tinatawag nating breakdowns of the major as is follow. Since yung mga respondents sila or yung mga participants sila is kukuha sila ng sample doon sa mga college students. No? There are 560 from the English major. So there are 1,135 science from the 4,000 participants and 800 computer science from the 4,000 participants and 1,090 from engineering and 450 from the math. So paano ba nakuha itong 560, 100, 135, 800, 190 to 415? So based on sa ginawa kong calculation, no, sa 400, sa 4,000, para makuha natin yung percentage kung medyo accurate ba yung sampling na ginawa nila. So from 560 is dinivide nila sa 4,000. So that's 4.14 times 100. So that's dapat makuha lang 14%. So let's try to analyze later on kung medyo na-meet ba nila yung tamang percentage ng sampling. Okay? So hindi ko makita. So here, so the research study the data of the populations to determine the percentage of the 21 million students that major in the subjects from their sample. So the findings shows the following. So kanina doon sa English major nagkaroon ng 14%, pero ang lumabas dito is 12%. So 28% from the major in science, 24% major in computer science, 21% major in engineering, and 15% in major in mathematics. So, ang nangyari is the team decides to employ a proportional stratified random sample whereby they want to determine if the majors of the students in the sample represent the same proportion as the population. So, however, it's being stated here, the proportions in the sample are not equal to the percentage in the population. So, ang ginawa nila is nagkaroon sila ng resampling. no, from 40% of the students in the sample are English major, so nag-reduce sa into 12%. So ang ginawa nila, nag-resampling sila, binabaan nila or nag-resampling from 560 English majors, from 560 na English majors, naging 480 na lang po sa dito. Ito po yung base po doon sa understanding and computation ko po. So 12% of the 4,000, so 1,120 science majors. So sa 560, as we go back to this slide po, sa 560 na English, dito naging 480 na lang po sa English majors para ma-meet yung 12% kasi nagkaroon sila ng resampling. So from 135 na science major, nagkaroon na lang ng 1,120 science major to meet para ma-meet on, para maging proportion yung percentage doon sa population na kinuha nila. So from 800 na computer science majors, no, naging 960 computer science major, which is 24% of the 4,000. So 960 divided to 4,000 is 0.24 times 100 is naging 24%. No, and the same thing also with the engineering majors. No, as we go back here also with the slide, no, that's 1,090. So naging 840 na lang sa ginawa nilang resampling. So that's 21% of the 4,000. No, and also with the math majors with 415, so naging 600 mathematics majors, which is 15% of the 4,000. So ang naging conclusion nila dito is na-meet nila, no, the proportionate stratified random sampling of college students and the respective major, which more accurately reflects the major for the overall student population. So from there, the researchers can analyze the GPAs of each stratum as well as their characteristics to get a better sense on how the overall students' population is performed. So I guess that's the end of my report for this afternoon, Doc.